Ko Awasi akapita Hero akaingia Kisumu pale na Nyamasaria. Ndio Makasembo alikuwa anaongoza urukumarika gutu usimradi nimekomea na ngao.
Ile kitu ambaye imeniletea amani kwa roho ni kitu ambayo inaitwa handshake. Tunataka jamii zote za Kenya zijisikie ziko ndani ya serikali na ndio serikali iwe yao. Kuna shida?
Welcome back to the show. That was Kisumu, actually just today. Linus, we will start with you. Raila Odinga there going back down memory lane. President himself saying, kama kuna kitu inampatia amani. It's the handshake. But essentially, one would say the BBI campaigns have hit the road.
That's very true, and they have hit the road in a very, very strong way, considering the strong show by the public. You see, politics is fed by crowds. It's about that excitement and attendance, numbers, the kind of activity that we saw in the streets of Kisumu today. For President Uhuru Kenyatta, this day is significant in a number of ways. First of all, there is the historical side of things. The historical side of things is what Raila Odinga was referring to right there. It is October 2020. In October 1969, his father, President Jomo Kenyatta, and the father of Raila Odinga, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, were in Kisumu, but in an atmosphere that was dramatically contrasting to what we saw today. It was an atmosphere of hostility. It was an atmosphere that ended in tension and death. A lot of people died. And that has always defined the relations between the mountain and the lake. So the excitement is also about this reaching out that is happening, which is why you saw President Uhuru Kenyatta getting a treatment that is less presidential in terms of the protocol. You could see the way his motorcade had a difficulty. Because in Kisumu, this is how they show their political enthusiasm. It's a very, very, very
picked a good place to get political energy for something like this.
And presidents have done this. If you remember, just before the 2010 referendum, President Mwai Kibaki was in Kisumu for another very, very huge, and was given this kind of huge reception. It's always like a therapy for politicians. That crowd works a good thing for them. It's a good feeling. But thirdly also is the issue of the handshake, which he described as his happiest moment. Let it not be forgotten that President Uhuru Kenyatta was today in the bastion of opposition politics, a place that twice, or is it thrice, voted against him. Because in the last election, there was even no election in this place.
Actually, in October 2017,
yes.
4 days from today.
There was barely an election that took place in Kisumu itself.
Yeah, there was no election. So it was a visit full of significance. But the bottom line is, and back to the question you asked, BBI report was only launched yesterday. It was only received yesterday, rather. The launch is on Monday. But when you look at the roadshow that was put out today, this is a strong start.
And Francis, we are seeing Uhuru Kenyatta we haven't quite seen in a long time. I mean, he's been kind of making these cameo appearances when he's coming from maybe JKUAT or something like that, stopping by Githurai or someplace. But what we saw today was the president in full campaign mode, you know, doing a jig here and generally looking quite excited.
Absolutely, and the campaigns are on. The BBI discussion and the attendant politics are on. It will be full throttle from now henceforth, you know, and this definitely will take us up to the 2022 general election. So if there was any doubt as to whether we are in a political environment, the political season is here, we are right into it. And look at the crowds in Kisumu. And before that, look at what was happening in Kisii. And obviously, you know, the symbolism is also important to take note of. That the president spoke heavily about BBI, the constitutional movement, and you know, winner takes it all those issues in Kisii at the Gusii Stadium during the Mashujaa Day celebrations. And the following day, the unveiling, or I mean, the handover of the report. I look at those two situations together, you know, side by side, that probably it would have been possible even to have the report handed over to him at Gusii Stadium. But look at the scenario. They probably didn't want to have two major events that would have maybe, you know, stolen the show from each other. Have the BBI handover the following day so that you have a discussion about it. And unlike the handover of the first report, where people didn't get to see the content of the report until it was unveiled at the Bomas of Kenya. This one, it was handover of the report and immediately release it.
He actually even told them, give it to as many people as possible. Give
it out so that people can have a discussion around it. And that discussion is on. And I would think a bit of the caution on the part of the deputy president's side, because probably they want to, you know, get to see the nitty-gritty of the details. Because, I mean, the devil is always in the detail. But the other side, the president and the ODM leader, immediately hit the road running. And yesterday, the president told us, this is the first time I'm seeing the report. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about it, because today he was in Kisumu telling the people to support it.
There was a whole night, what? Maybe he read it at night, Francis.
I don't think he read the whole document over, you know, the whole night. But basically, I would think he had an idea about what was contained in it. And that's why the campaign for the document is on. So now the idea is whether it will get the consensus from across the political divide. And also take note of what happened at Gusii Stadium. You saw that lineup of politicians, you know, all of them even doing that jig. And if you keenly noted, the front row at Gusii Stadium, you know, the president, the deputy president, the army commanders, the speakers of the two chambers of parliament, the other political leaders were behind. But when the jig was on, you could see the president summoning them, you know, come, let's dance. You know, I think there was an intended message, an intended, you know, visual message that this is it. So now, whether we will have a win-win kind of a constitutional process, a win-win kind of a referendum, is the ultimate question.
I want us to talk a little bit about the deputy president, because I think the big question will be, where does he go from here? And I think we have some sound bites of what he was saying. I think it must have been yesterday.
Lakini sasa halftime imekwisha, wachezaji wameshanyoroshwa, wameshapata nini mafunzo, tena wamepata massaging, sasa wanarudi kwa kiwanja, Your Excellency. Na wewe mwenyewe ndio utasema hii njia tunataka kufuata sasa kwa kutoka hapa, because nobody can stop reggae.
The former Prime Minister has told us about the reggae, which is fine, but I guess we will have a robust national conversation that will bring everybody on board.
The Deputy President talking about a robust national conversation, and I think this has kind of been his line. I think even from the days when the first report was being unveiled, being launched at the Bomas of Kenya, he seems to be saying, well, you know, reggae is fine, you can keep the beat going, but can we have a conversation? Yvonne, what are you reading? Because the Deputy President seems to have said so many things about this entire process, even before the report came out, so much so that it will be quite interesting to see what he says now. He has to make that decision. I mean, does he go with this? Does he continue with the narrative that, you know, this is jobs for the boys? Mtu mdogo wa wheelbarrow atafanya nini?
But I think we saw an indication of that, because when the report was being handed over, he was at a different function, and again saying the same thing. I think we'll continue to see more of the same. I mean, in this particular conversation, his stand has been so clear, it would be difficult to imagine, anything else. And the focus, like you will see, will be on the expanded executive, the jobs that are being provided for certain individuals is what we will continue to see. I think for the Deputy President, but it would be interesting to see if he attempts to change his mind on an issue that he has been dead set against, together with his lieutenants for quite some time. And like Gashuri mentioned, there's been some caution with them, with all of this euphoria that has come out after the report was handed over officially to the President and the former Prime Minister. So some caution with that, but you have to see certain indications of what they're saying on social media, with his lieutenants. But I think also for him, maybe one of the rallying calls for him now will be, the issue of the dynasties and these two individuals who are coming together. The pictures that you saw today were quite reminiscent of that, like, Linus had mentioned, that you have these two big political dynasties whose love and feud has, defined in a very big way the political landscape of the country. And now with, that scenario that we have of them, coming together and perhaps righting the wrongs and mending the fences after their fathers had fallen out, and perhaps, sorting out those issues once and for all. So, I mean, there is a possibility that he will bring this up, that this is about dynasties making peace. I find it difficult to see him going in any other way, and, his back is truly against the rope.
It would be interesting to see, Joe, on what Yvonne has said, like on Monday, when we have now the report being unveiled in Bomas, where the Deputy President will, whether he'll be there, and even if he does come, because I think all indications are maybe he'll be there, is what the body language will be. How will it be? Compare this to what happened in Bomas last year, during now the first time that the draft was being launched, and how the camaraderie between the President and Raila was, and Ruto almost looked like almost excluded in that whole picture. It'll be interesting to see what happens on Monday. But then now going forward, Gashuri touched on it and said now campaigns for the BBI are on. What we saw in Kisumu is just the beginning, Kionjo. And I don't think what we saw there was like a lot of people, and we kept talking about that crowd that was there and the President and how he spoke. And this is the first time I think in a while we've seen him like that, speak out so openly,
and
happy. He even joked about kama mama atakubali nipate mtu hapo wa kunisaidia. We don't see the President like that, especially in such a crowd. And now going forward, we're going to see these campaigns going everywhere, every part of this country. And remember, this is being backed by state machinery, so expect to see this huge show, I think, everywhere they go, in terms of even security, venue, people, merchandise, banners and all those things tutaziona pale. And then now the politicians who will probably be supporting it. And I think even governors, most of these governors who are second-term governors, ambao sasa this report has not said anything about them maybe extending and going for a third time, or any of those regional governments we're talking about, they're going to support this, because for them, they're almost getting a landing in terms of most will probably run maybe for Member of Parliament, so that they end up in the National Assembly, ndo waweze kuchaguliwa kwa cabinet ministers. So expect to see a lot of these second-term governors who are trying to find somewhere to land after now miaka yao 10 ikwishe, supporting this. And we will see this all across the country. Kisumu was just the beginning. I'm sure we'll see a huge crowd probably in Mombasa, Central. So I think we need to be ready for politics, BBI, and this will go on, I think, till elections are 2020.
I wanted to add something, sorry, before you move, about just the significance of what we saw today. Around this time in 2017, we were 4 days away from the repeat presidential election. And it's, not lost on me that at that time, there was a big crisis of legitimacy, of the presidency, which is something that, President Uhuru Kenyatta battled with quite a bit. And now that the two protagonists are in the same camp, you see that camaraderie, you see the reception in Kisumu. That for me was just, sort of a striking difference in this exact month, 3 years apart. But now you're seeing them, coming together, making peace. You're seeing the president, having all those, crowds of people in Kisumu, and just how much the handshake has been a thing for President Uhuru Kenyatta in terms of granting him legitimacy in his second and final term, with his incumbency, that he would not have otherwise enjoyed were it not for, the handshake and where we are now with the BBI
process. As a matter
process.
of fact, Yvonne, actually a lot of people in that part of the country never quite recognized him as the president.
Didn't. There was a boycott at the time.
At a point
remember?
like this,
yes.
in 2017, they didn't see him as president of Kenya. But Lina, something very interesting that comes out through this document as we talk about who is going to take what position going forward. There's something quite intriguing about the document in the sense that it throws in a few sweeteners that might attract different groups, yet it has some other things that are also quite problematic. So there are interesting decisions that people will have to make going forward about what to do with this document.
Very true, Joe. It's a balance of very, very interesting things in it. And I think the problem will be in how it will be packaged at the referendum point. And Paul, we didn't quite get there in terms of explaining how the question will be framed. But the bottom line is the first selling point of this document is the expanded executive. That is what the handshake was all about. Forget about the youth commission that came in up there. There are a lot of things that will be
the ward fund,
the ward fund. These are just nice things to be thrown in also to build a greater coalition. It'll be very, very interesting to see what the civil society, what the intellectual body will be saying. I would want to hear what Yashpal Guy thinks about this. He's gone through a lot of drafts. We had Dr. Willie Mutunga, the former Chief Justice, here yesterday, and he also had some very, very interesting views. But the one takeout that I got from his conversation is, constitutions can be changed anytime. It is the prerogative of the country, whether it's leaders or the public. But the one thing that also comes out, Joe, about this document is this is the first top-down document. Mm-hmm. When you look at the history of our country in terms of constitutional changes, all previous constitutional changes were instigated from below. When you go back to the removal of Section 2A, it was because it started with the University of Nairobi, where lecturers were basically critical of how our democracy was arranged at the time, and then it went on to civil society, it went on to the streets,
religious organizations,
yes, clergy as well, clergy, yeah. and we changed Section 2A to bring back multi-party politics. When you look at the 2005 Constitution, it was also the carrying forward of the pressure that was started by the likes of the National Constitution Review teams that included the likes of Kibwana, the likes of Dr. Willie Mutunga and all that. But where is this one coming from? We have heard the President Uhuru Kenyatta on a number of occasions now declaring this is a constitutional moment. And I always say you don't declare a constitutional moment. Constitutional moments are self-evident. Yes. They'll introduce themselves. Right. They'll announce themselves. For this one, so sorry, but I think it is an induced constitutional moment.
Well, some people would say it's a ceasefire document, considering that it emerged from the handshake, the ashes of the war that we had, political one, at least in 2017.
It does, and it takes me to my pet subject, which is, does it address the reason there was the handshake in the first place, which was, messy elections that we've had for the last 3 elections. Right. That is the problem, I think, that going forward the country will have to lead from, deal with. But the point is, this is top-down. It's coming from the leaders, going to the people. But is it something wrong? I don't know. Because when you look at President Uhuru Kenyatta and look at Raila Odinga and the show they've had in Kisii and Kisumu, you're talking about 2 of the most formidable political forces in the country. They can cite their numbers in the last elections, but also they can cite their current strength in their bases. How much in terms of numbers can they marshal? Quite substantial.
Well, Joe, I look at it this way. When you read the report, I've been trying to read it to the best of my ability. But therein you see some interesting things that are being used to attract the masses. But as I said earlier, the devil is in the details. You know, it's a mixed bag, if you may like it. There's some areas that will require some serious decision making. Others, well, one can argue that probably they could have been done administratively, maybe amending some acts of parliament and so on and so forth. For example, there's a proposal to establish a police council. And the chair, and part of this police council will be the minister in charge of interior or internal security, do away with the National Police Service Commission. You remember there was a question earlier on about the independence of the police force, which was now turned into a police service, and the police being used as a weapon for political, to deal with political dissent. Then somebody would ask, this minister in charge of national security or internal security, or whichever name they will give it, is an appointee of the president, so owes his loyalty to the president. So if he has a role in the operations of the police, then there could be an issue therein, number one. Number two,
but don't they say, right, even now with the Police Service Commission, haven't we had those allegations still just 2 weeks ago, I think it
precisely
was. Right.
Then the youth
sorry, Joe, but the National Police Service Commission, National Police Service Commission,
yes,
I think the drafters of this constitution intended it to be independent. In fact, when you look at how it's constituted, it is supposed to be independent. And I think the point you're making, which is very valid, Francis, right there, is the Kenya Police Council, compared to the National Police Service Commission, will be a less independent body. Because you can't have the ministers...
By law.
By law, yes. Because the minister sits, and then he is the minister in charge of security, but also the head of the Kenya Police Council. Yeah, it is a question, I think, that a lot of people will question in terms of independence.
The bottom line that we have to talk about in this country is that at the end of the day, usually what happens is that there is what the law says, and then there is what ends up being done. You know, like what the late Professor Okoth Gendo used to talk about, constitutions without constitutional analysis, that you have what is written in the law and what ends up happening. I mean, a lot of institutions today, including the IEBC, is actually independent. That is even part of it.
What you're actually saying, Joe, is the National Police Service Commission is functioning exactly like the Kenya Police Council should. Already.
So well, that is one. that is one. Number two, then there is the Youth Commission.
Yes, I don't want us to
a very interesting thing being presented. You know, a Youth Commission, and it probably seeks to answer the question of many young people in this country who have the skills, who have the education, but they don't have the opportunities and the resources to, you know, even do business or get employment. And a vast majority of this country, I dare say up to 70%, are young people. So if you don't deal with their issues, then there's a problem. So will creating a youth commission resolve the many issues affecting young people? That would be a fundamental question to ask. And then number three, there's the tax holiday, the 7-year
tax holiday for youth and startups.
For young entrepreneurs. A very nice thing. Sounds very good, because many young people would want to venture into business.
But does that need a constitutional amendment?
Those are the issues, but these are some of the sweeteners I'm talking about. When you look at some of them, they're very enticing. And you'll see them being used out there to drum up support for the BBI report. And finally, the question of gender inclusion. You see now, the Kenyan women are being told this is now your opportunity to feel included and, you know, to resolve the question of gender principle that has been elusive ever since 2010 or thereabout. So there are quite a number of interesting things that will be there, and let's see how the discussion pans out. But it would be important for everybody to read this report, interact with it, find out those interesting things. But now there also another question I would ask is the discussion over for ordinary citizens? Because in terms of consensus building and so on and so forth, maybe the next place Kenyans will be involved is at the ballot during the referendum, because now the next phase now largely belongs to the political class, because there will be an opportunity to collect signatures, take them to IEBC for verification, take the bill to the county assemblies. MCAs have a great role to play in this, because at least 24 out of 47 county assemblies must say yes to the report and the proposed bill for it to proceed to the next step. National Assembly and the Senate, and whatever happens there, ultimately it will end up in a referendum. So we are in for a long journey that will be very political. And remember, a referendum or amending the constitution is much a political process as is a legal process. So side by side, we are in for quite some interesting
and an expensive process too, Gashure. Let's not forget that. And we start with the memo. Tonight